and how we implemented the proof of concept. I will give now a little bit the floor to Dimi from DG Move, who will give us a nice introduction on how this work came about, and we will start with the slides and the content of the webinar. So please, Dimi, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Claudio, and the team for organizing this webinar. I would like to say apologies for my voice. I just got a cold over the weekend, but I hope that you can still hear me well. I would really like to thank everyone for taking the time indeed to join this webinar. A little bit of background history is that, as some of you probably know, that the Commission is working for the last years, especially starting after the EU data strategy, on the development of common European data spaces in the various sectors, one of them also in mobility and transport. And as we have launched various preparatory actions and deployment actions to see how we will develop and tackle the needs for a common European mobility data space and its framework, a question came up: how do we handle personal data in the framework, in the realm of the Common European Mobility Data Space, or EMDS? We will be using the acronym as well, interchangeably. So as we had to look into that, of course, personal mobility of passengers is linked to the personal data and the use of those data. And as we move around in urban environment or in a regional environment, there will be this need of sharing, let's say, our personal data, our destination, where we go, where we stay, the means of transport, and so on, with various stakeholders, transport operators, service providers, and so on. So we defined these actors, we defined use cases with a view of a user. The user is a person that would like to commute from their place to the working environment, and the relevant actors that would need to, let's say, get access to this data to inform the commuters if there are any changes in the schedule, if there are works, if there are cancellations of any kind of event that would disrupt their commute, and then they could inform them. So the transport operator or a service provider could inform them for changes. You will see later that although the deliverable is a software tool, a software piece, an SDK, we would like to be able to visualize a little bit of what could be the potential of the use of this SDK. That's why the demo app that you will use, it's purely for demonstration purposes. It's a mock-up app, both from the user side and from the transport operator side. But it will help us a little bit explain what the options, let's say, when there is this use of solid pods and protocols that Claudio and the team will present today. This is an option, let's say, one technological choice, for example, of how this could be implemented. Of course, there could be other options as well. We would like to hear that also from your side. We would like to work closely also with local authorities and transport operators to test, let's say, this proof of concept, this POC, and at the same time to see how, for example, other initiatives would fit into that, like the EU digital wallet and so on. But I leave this now, Claudio, to you and the team to guide us through the proof of concept.
Thank you so much, Dimi. So yeah, without further ado, let's move into the presentation. So maybe if we can go to the next slide. So this will be the structure of the presentation, and also a little bit how this came about. So SEMIC is the semantic interoperability community. It's an action at the Commission, and it is the context in which this work is taking place. As Dimi said, is being proposed by Move in collaboration with Connect and executed by SEMIC contract to PwC with the expertise of digital when it comes to the use and the implementation of Solid. So all of this, the the inception of this work happened because within the Common European Mobility Data Space, there's been a request by MOVE in particular to find a way to systematize the legislation around personal data into a component that can be integrated in any process that is exchanging personal data. So altogether, we wanted to first and foremost find a way to translate the legislation into say a programmatic way and refer to it in a way that is processable, and so taking out always the same result as the input is the same, but also is a way to delegate and make compliant every party who's using this component with the legislation. Because nowadays we know for any entity who's handling personal data, they will have to locally implement a solution. So that takes effort, that takes resources, that take licenses. They have every entity, an enterprise, or even a public entity, they have to find a solution for personal data. Now, the idea is to decentralize this. And as we do this, we also want to manifest in a more agile way for the individuals who are the owner of the personal data to execute what, for instance, the GDPR is hinted to be, is defined to be the right to give, the right to revoke consent, but also obviously give consent to access the data, or avoid that the data who have been shared, they are utilized in a way that is not in the initial intention. So altogether, this was the request. We then were to operate within the Common European Mobility Data Space, where the actors that exchange personal data are the one that you see in this picture, are obviously the individual commuter, which make the private individual. And then there are the public transport authority, the public transport operator, transport infrastructure manager, infrastructure operators, and service providers. So all of them, one way or another, they handle personal data. We move to the next slide. Now, to make this even more concrete, we decided, as Dimi has explained, to devise two use cases. For the commuters, the commuter will request or say use a service provider that issue recommendations on what is the best multimodal path on the commuter journey. Okay, so and the recommendation is triggered by the fact that can be disruption events. So on one side, the commuter is sharing his personal data, as in his identity, his location, where he lives, where he works, whether they own any public transport card, whether they own a car, whether they own another vehicle. So this is the share of personal data that are put by the commuters. And in order to mix this with the disruption events and the data from the mobility, the Common European Mobility Data Space are also given to the service provider, which puts all of this together and then is able to recommend the best commuting path. On the side of the mobility actors, it goes almost without saying that the mobility actors, in order to improve the service offering, they analyze personal data. They analyze how commuters use the infrastructure, how commuters use the public transportation. That's because they can then decide whether to increase or decrease a certain schedule, whether to open a new, say, bike lane on a certain path, whether to increase the number of charging points for electric vehicle, and so on and so forth. So there are benefits on both sides. And these are the use cases that we decide to look into and how the personal data are then handled there. So move to the other slide. So when we think again to what are the core aspects that these components will eventually provide into systematize the legislation for handling personal data. We said already the control to exercise the right to grant and revoke consent, the fact that personal data are not used beyond the original intention for the provision of the service for which they've been shared, that they are not post-processed or transferred without consent, and control of the life cycle of the personal data, and eventually reverse the original consent, use the personal data according to the terms and conditions attached to the service, also provide identity verification and the ability to sign up for multiple mobility services, which in nowadays case, a person, say like myself, I have to provide my personal data to each single provider. Obviously, there is an effect of decentralization of the personal data storage, meaning I'm not transferring my personal data, but I have to keep it somewhere where I can exercise my control. And also, there has to be a minimal footprint for compatibility with data exchange mechanism across the participant of the common European mobility data space, which means as much as we can keep this solution minimal in terms of dependency, will increase adoption. And finally, but not least, and probably the most important aspect that we are dealing with when we talk about data sovereignty, is this systematization of the European legislation on the matter of handling personal data. And we can refer to many of these laws that make all together the regulatory framework, which is the GDPR, the Data Act, the Data Governance Act, and the AFIR, for instance, to mention one specific for mobility. So these are the core aspects. Any of this could be implemented with makes the request from move. And any of this at this point could have been implemented or designed and then implemented in every possible way. Now, when SEMIC, if we can move to the other slide, when SEMIC, we received this with the request and we analyzed it, we have put it in, we start drawing connection with what is already happening at the European level. And obviously, we make connection with the activity of the Data Space Support Center, identifying that these requests nicely fit in what is in the hierarchy of building block is named data sovereignty and trust. Then we draw connection with the IDSA in the sense that the law refers to roles, and the IDSA in this reference architecture as defined roles, like as they are the data owner, the data consumer, data customer, intermediary. All of these roles, they are defined to act within certain boundaries. Now, these boundaries are the one that we have connected with, for instance, the GDPR, and we have systematized. Okay, so we know that our solution can be ported across data spaces. This was important to us also to realize. Obviously, SEMIC being SEMIC and taking care of the semantic interoperability, we have injected SEMIC specification when it comes to model the data that are exchanged. And after doing an analysis of what options exist in terms of technology to implement the components such as this one, we decided to make our test with Solid. Finally, the design decision to deliver the result as a component that can be integrated by other software projects was to have it, in fact, the component as a software development kit, which is, you will see by the end, an open source project, which can be obviously well collaborated by everyone, but also downloaded and integrated. Can we go to the next slide? Now, I will at this point, when I hope I pictured a little bit the from the inception to the design, to the understanding and the design decision of how the POC was conceived. And now I will hand it over to Isabeau, which will then really much go even in more detail of what we heard so far. So Isabeau, I'll leave it to you.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Yeah, I will just try to illustrate the two use cases again through a visualization, and then hand it over to Wout, who will then explain a bit more and go deeper into the examples and the screenshot, the screens that you'll see, and everything will be very clear in the end, hopefully. So we start off with use case 1, the commuter. If you remember, the goal here is to get personal travel recommendations. There are 2 data suppliers in our story. Here on the left, we have the commuter. The commuter stores their data in the personal data space, the space that captures your data, such as your identity information, work, home address, maybe your public transport card. And on the right side, the second data supplier are the mobility actors. They exchange their data in the European mobility data space, EMDS, and these can be travel disruptions, as said before, like roadblocks or railway employee strikes, for example. Now, we envisioned through the use of the tools mentioned in the previous slides, we could create a software development kit that would help third parties connect their application to the personal data space in an easy way. So more on that later, but to illustrate this, we came up with a fictive application. Some company would maybe want to solve the commuting problem and make use of the data of these 2 spaces in order to offer better personalized commuting recommendations to commuters. But they want to do this with the consent of the user and be in line with European legislations, like we mentioned before. And we coined this app Commute Ease as an illustrative example to the POC. And the SDK, the software development kit, fits in here, where we access the data from the personal data space through the third-party application. Commuters can provide consent for personal data to be accessed from their personal solid pod. More on that later, but it's basically their personal data vault through the SDK. And now on the right-hand side, to complete the use case, Commute Ease, our fictive company, also accesses the EMDS through connectors available. Ultimately, they combine these data from different sources to make personal travel recommendations in a compliant and consented manner. Second schematic view, second use case is then again with these 2 sources, personal data space, the EMDS again, but this allows mobility actors to use anonymized personal data in a consented manner through the solid pod, through the SDK. Mobility actors can analyze then the commuting patterns to enhance the schedule of perhaps public transport or open a new bike lane. So I hope this gives you a bit more clear image into the 2 use cases. If you're still a bit confused, no worries. I'll give the word over to Wout, who will demonstrate with our app Commute Ease. Wout, would it be a good idea to hand the slides over to you?
Yeah, that would be great. And hello, everyone. As Isabeau already mentioned, my name is Wouter Janssens. I'm the co-founder of Digita, a company specialized in solid and any technology related to interoperability of personal data. I'll start by sharing my screen. By the way, as you can see, I'm currently in the Austrian mountains, so greetings from my beautiful holiday destination. Here we go. Can someone confirm that you're seeing my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. So before diving into the screens themselves, just a small word on Solid, because there is still quite some confusion about exactly what it is. So Solid is a set of technical rules, a specification, a protocol that basically standardizes how applications interact with each other on the level of personal data. Now, what's special about Solid is that it's an open specification managed by the W3C. It's currently a W3C working group to standardize those interactions. And that's important because that interoperability will allow third parties to integrate with the ecosystem with ease. And on top of that, Solid offers quite some unique features with regards to data sovereignty. For example, offering the users the possibility to create a pod, let's say a personal data vault somewhere in the cloud where they can store their data, as well as some advanced data protection features, such as access control. Now, what makes Solid quite special is that all of the different components of the ecosystems are decoupled, as we say. So in other words, an application can be offered without having the developer being forced to offer as well the identity provider as the data storage, as it is currently the case. Now, in the future, with Solid or similar technologies, it would be possible that all of those three components are offered by different providers. And that's important from the point of view of data protection, where none of those different parties will have the keys to the kingdom, let's say, the full truth and full control of the data, and that control is given back to the end user. Now, that's all good and well, but integrating with Solid and all of those different components can be quite difficult because it obviously requires some kind of expertise in Solid or similar technologies, as well as necessary resources to develop the technical components required to do so. So in order to tackle those two barriers, we suggested creating a software development kit that would reduce those barriers as much as possible so that application developers and third parties have a much easier time integrating with the ecosystem. Now, the software development kit in itself has a scope that should cover the entire journey, typical journey of an application within Solid, from authenticating the user to registration and interacting with the data stored in the user's pod. Not going into too much detail, it has already been mentioned, but the project is available on GitHub, so happy to collaborate on that. Now, onto the demo itself. So I think, as Dimi mentioned in the beginning, the goal of the demo is more to demonstrate what would be possible with the SDK in the future. So it's not a real live application, but it's more a concept of what would be possible. Now, we'll start with the first perspective, let's say, being the commuter using the Commute Ease app to get a personalized itinerary to commute to work. So the journey starts by the user opening the application for the first time and having the opportunity to either sign in or sign up for a pod when he doesn't already have one. When the user doesn't already have one, no problem, he'll be able to sign up for a pod with just a few easy steps. Depending on the exact provider, it can be as simple as providing your email address or your name and being able to sign up for a pod. Obviously, depending on the specific provider, that can change. The user would then be able to sign in to the application by using the identity provider stored or provided by their pod provider. In this case, we're using the one provided by Data, use.id, where we allow for signing with email, but obviously that can be any type of authentication mechanism out there. Then the user would be able to set up their account by providing all of the necessary information, such as their home address and their work address, as well as their preferred modes of transportation and the days they would like to commute to work. Obviously, the user would be in full control on exactly what data is shared with the application, even before starting to use the application, but even afterwards, the user would be able to edit their preferences from the application. And then obviously, once all of that data has been, or the access has been provided to the commute ESAP, the commute ESAP would be able to use that data to provide a personalized itinerary. Now, from the point of view of the infrastructure operator, obviously there is also a big added value. First of all, it's important to realize that exchanging data is not just a one-way stream. Bidirectional exchange of data is perfectly available, is perfectly possible. So the infrastructure operator would be able to get an overview, obviously in an anonymized way, on the usage of the infrastructure, as well as being able to communicate the potential disruptions in their service that could be then communicated back through notifications to the end user. So that in the end, let's say the circle is full, is complete. The user has shared his data. The infrastructure provider was able to act on that data and create an added value by sharing insights back to the commuter. And obviously, at the end of the day, what's it all about? Providing recommendations to the commuter. Claudio, I think I'll hand it over to you again at this point.
Yes.
Yes. In any case,
I'll share the slides because I have the updated version as well.
Sure.
That would be
Okay. Okay. So I hope so far people grasped the idea what we're trying to do. So again, it is important to understand that data sovereignty altogether is the means by all of the regulations that are in place for exercising control over personal data by the individual. The individual wants the data, and we would like to put that regulatory framework into. Can we just go back to the slide that says demo remarks?
Sure.
And so what we're trying to do is, or what we have done, is to make a first exercise or a fixed experience on how it is possible to systematize the law. Because we want to put that power from, say, having to write as an individual to the data, the responsible person, into each and every single company that has my own data to exercise my rights to delete my personal data. We want to make that way more simpler by, as simple as, for instance, switching on and off my sharing, the sharing of my personal data with an entirely with the service provider, or with a fine grained level for one single service provider. So I say I don't want to share anymore my location or where I work, or things like this. We thought that the principle by which Solid is say working, where they say the fastest to try an experience like this, because of the concept of pod as a container, and the fact that personal data are not transferred from the pod to somewhere else. Personal data are accessed, and by the fact that someone with a certain role, which also has certain capabilities designed by law, is accessing my personal data, I can also exercise that control on the interface. So all of these are ideas. All of these are concepts that we want to strengthen. We want to strengthen, for instance, the extent to which this legislation has been implemented as part of the SDK. We want to strengthen the definition of the roles and how their capabilities can be translated in rules for accessing personal data, and so on and so forth. So for everybody interested who's listening, we are on a trajectory to present this work, which we, by the way, we have found to be of high relevance and importance for at the very least in the sector of mobility, because personal data are a sensitive matter. And we are on this trajectory to repeat maybe another cycle of implementation with operators which are really on real life operator, what you would call them, and then learn more, what are the options out there. Okay, in terms of, because I've seen someone is asking about the repository of the SDK. Yes, you also there in the, it's also there in the chat. And if you are a technical person, you can go through the set of, say the libraries or the capabilities, and see what how integrating the SDK would simplify the interaction of the application with the solid, say with the solid pod and all of the solid architecture, which is something that we really wanted to achieve for raising interest and maybe quicken also expect the adoption in terms of experiments. What else can be added? Can we go to the next slide? Yes, our future outlook. I think I hinted already to this. We are open to input from, by now I think we have presented this maybe 10 times, and every time, for instance, we were there at the Gantt event on Solid, where we found out that there is a language that is called ODRL, which enables very much the translation of the law into say a representation of the law in a way that can be processed in a way that is compatible with Solid. And as Dimi said at the beginning, we really want to work closely to the digital wallet, the activities that are running on the digital wallet. We have contact also with verifiable people developing verifiable credential at the Commission. In essence, we don't want to say work on this in an isolated way. But one more reason to talk to Data Space Support Center, because they will have a much broader view of what is happening in the data space, how would you say, space again, for how relevant this work is at this present moment, or maybe in the coming future. Because as from what I feel, we are kind of pioneering this set of the work on data sovereignty. And I would very much be informed of other activities so that we can exchange in the coming future. Yes, I said already, but it doesn't hurt to repeat that we want to connect with providers of technologies that handle personal data, eventually to have an option to Solid. All of this is for now you as audience of this webinar, but in enlarge the community who's serving personal data to get in touch and move on with the work. I think this was the last slide. Yes, yes. So altogether, yeah, a big thank you on behalf of my behalf and the team who has prepared this work. And I think it's now time for hearing your opinion, any kind of feedback. You can also be controversial if you have say the will, and so spark a conversation for the next hour or so. Thank you very much. So we can take intervention with voice mic, or we can read from the chat, and then in that case I will leave it to Arne to take raise hands. So that also works. So Arne, you can maybe schedule the intervention and take it from the chat. we'll be here, or anybody in general, to answer the questions.
All right. Malte, I see your hand is raised.
Hello, just first of all, show my face and thank you for the presentation. My name is Malte Katzenberger. I'm one of the writers of the European Data Strategy. And if you have discovered the My Data reference, this is basically what I try to plug in. I'm following My Data principles for the past 10 years. And I'm really happy that I see it now materialize in this proof of concept. I'm following basically solid pods and also private services for years. And the key question I will have for this session is, what do we believe that we have a sufficiently convincing case for individuals to make also personally that effort to say, okay, I'll migrate into this personal data pods, data vaults approach. I will actually make the effort to pre-fill a pod which currently is maybe empty at the beginning and where I don't really know whether I will have enough advantages, which I still saw as well over the many years I'm following this, still see one of the big implementation hurdles. The other one being that the rollout was a problem, but luckily Flanders solved this problem for us. So do you think, is there an expectation that as a individual, I will actually want to make the minimum initial effort to use a pod approach? That's my question.
I can give my opinion. So, and again, after presenting this many times and having comments like this, I formulated these thoughts. We cannot not have it. Imagine you're in a building that doesn't, they say, oh, this building will never catch fire, so it's useless to put extinguisher. But then something happened, you really need an extinguisher, and you don't find it. People, yeah, obviously we live in in an age where we are not even aware what is personal data and how people are using our data, because we are really happy to use the service because we get a benefit which is larger than worrying. So until there is an Armageddon event where we understand that our personal data is all over, and then people can use it against us, against our interests, or against our whatever, this issue won't be will never be a pressing issue. But say, I can give you an example. When Corona came, suddenly the Zoom company, skyrocketed. Why? Because Zoom was working on a solution, but that solution was really pressing. But at some point, remote working became necessary, and they became the company to go. And to me, this is a little bit is like this. We cannot just say, oh, it's not pressing. We should put it on a shelf for a little bit. We should work on it, and so that when and if it becomes necessary, is there.
Just to be sure, I'm the first to be convinced, because I've tried to evangelize many people on the same issue. I just maybe get a bit impatient on the rollout. I'll try to maybe also support Kai Kokaniemi in the DSSC to really push in this personal data store as a building brick, which has been very hard to get actually intermediaries as a building brick into the blueprint of DSSC. So happy to be in touch afterwards. And I'm also grateful for the SEMIC and MOVE colleagues to really think of personal data spaces as a component of data spaces, which I really also been fighting for along. And it's I think the mobility data space is the one where you first materialize the problem, and especially mobility data also being highly sensitive normally, and sensitive in a non-technical, non-GDPR sense. So I'm all on yours. I will support you where I can to also, because my service is also dealing with the data spaces support center. So if ever there's a blocking factor somewhere, just shout, and we'll plug this, channel this into the blueprint architecture.
Maybe I can briefly indeed add from my side. Thank you very much, Malte, for this comment. This is exactly what we want to achieve, to see how we can have a building block to tackle this, and also recommended by the Data Space Support Center, not only for the mobility data space, but for all data spaces. Indeed, I don't know, let's say the motivation in a way for the users to create this in the first place. That's true. That's why we try to show a little bit of added value, a use case where in this scenario, the user is taking something back because they will be informed about disruptions, so it makes them easier to go to the office or their user destination. I don't have a personal, preference for solid or not, but indeed we need a building block to tackle this personal data topic in the data space. So thank you very much for bringing this up.
If I can just maybe add some last thought to this, to our response, is that it's important to realize that solid and similar technologies, they're often protocols. You should see them as a common language, which can be used by different services. As a very concrete consequence of this, it will basically allow organizations to already offer pre-filled pods to the end users. And a good example of that is the Flemish government that's already doing that in production. So where, for example, at the moment already in Flanders, you can use your pod to share your diploma information. The user didn't have to take any action to create their pod or upload their diploma. So the barrier to entry is really low there. And you could even say that it opens up a second big benefit of similar technologies. And it's that it enables citizens to more easily reuse their data that they already have, rather than just centralizing their data in a pod and safeguarding it from bad actors.
All right. Thank you, Malte. I don't know if you have anything to add. Otherwise, we'll go to the next question. Ferdinand, I see that your hand is also raised.
Yeah, I was the last in a row of 3, so maybe the other guys.
Johannes, are you second?
Yeah, would be happy. So my question is on the data sovereignty. So as far as I understood, the sovereignty, so the control over your data, is one of the key aspects of Solid, but also of many data space initiatives out there. And how does Solid solve this in terms of after I granted someone access to my diploma or other data, then they have the data in hand, right? So the only thing I can control is whenever someone accesses the data in the first place. Did I get this right? So is this the case? And are there some plans to still control the data after it has been shared, or is this the key, the main point of action, like in the first interaction?
Do you want me to take that question, Claude?
Yes, please, yes.
So obviously, when you share data in a digital way, there is one dogma, and it's that once you expose your data in a digital way to someone, to an organization, obviously they would be able to copy that data. If you were to, for example, say we encrypt the data, so it can't be read and it can't be copied, then obviously it's worthless to the recipient. So it's it's the one or the other. Now, obviously, and I'll speak just for myself here, I don't see Solid or similar technologies as a silver bullet in this story. It won't solve all problems, and I don't think that it should try to solve all problems. I think instead, Solid should be seen as an interoperability layer that will allow providers and organizations to give sovereignty to the end user, rather than a technology being the one and only safeguard for that sovereignty. So it will always be a combination of organizations using the technology and lawmakers making sure that there is a framework that protects citizens as well. So I think there are multiple facets and aspects required in order to give people that real data sovereignty, but the interoperability offered by the Solid protocol already is a step in the right direction.
Yeah, thank you so much. I agree with that. So yeah, apparently, like in addition to the technical solutions, there's also like trust and contracts and all this, which plays together to in the end provides that solution that we need. Thank you.
All right. Then yeah, Ferdinand, your turn, I guess.
Yeah, well, thanks. Yeah, guys, good presentation. Thanks, Claudio. You know, we've been talking about this topic for ages. So me being in the EMDS myself, we have a very big issue, right? Creating technology for technology's sake is primarily where you do not want to go. Otherwise, we create garage ideas that have no, well, that do not resonate with what we're trying to achieve. To reach out to all these citizens in order to find a bit of value in what we're doing is simply not enough. People have enough issues with digitalization as is, and now we're trying to engineer a legal aspect, right? So if we deep dive into what is required from the law perspective, it's already written. And if you haven't read that, then maybe try to do it. Just take the Data Governance Act, the Data Act, and the GDPR, and you will see that they pretty much connect in a really good way. And this means that if we're interacting, the information, all right, is already related to two entities. One is the individual in this case, and the other one could be an authority or a service provider. But the difficulty is not in the technical building block, it's in the philosophy behind it. So if I can open up a slide or a window that simply allows others access to my information, that's a permanent setting, right? And this permanent setting is the one we need to kill. Although I can close it, it's still opened. And there are other aspects. So the points 2, 3, 4, and 5, which are actually mentioned after the number 1, that was the slide going yes or no to access my data, are legal aspects. These legal aspects are already covered. Let's not engineer the law. Let's leverage the law and support the law with technical building blocks, right? We're not engineering the world. And this is a very difficult thing to understand, is that you are mostly seeing the world through a reference framework which has to do with engineering, solving problems. But this is a question of philosophy and how do I want to be perceived by you? So I see that 40 people are in this meeting, right? All of you have a different concept of me, thanks to the words that I use, the redness of my face, the glasses, my background, my voice, anything. It's very difficult to communicate between people. And the word trust in an architecture is not written down by a philosopher, that's for sure, because the complexity is even more complex than architecture in itself. So let's try to do what we do as human beings, right? And that's two things. We want to communicate what's in our heads, right, through our mouths into someone else's ears for them to process in their brains. And this you can do, and you can support that with technical solutions. But what we do not do, and this is the difficulty with digitalization, is that we actually make a hard copy of that, whilst my mind forgets things. So if I have to remember what I ate Thursday 5 weeks ago, I wouldn't know unless it was a very, very special occasion. So we have to be mindful, right, that we don't over collect information or overshare. So I'm very happy with the concept of a centralized, decentralized environment to store information, because that can add to the value of lives of many people and reduce the, well, noise of having to register all your personal information everywhere. But let's rethink this in what we need to do and not simply because we can. and this is one of the things that I'm really weary for, because we're already creating a very large distance to the audience that's everyday lives of people. And the short step is far closer than we think, because we can leverage the law into making sure that organizations are compliant. And through that compliance regulation, we can also ensure that individuals can get access to their personal information and control over it. So the question is, are we engineering the solution? Are we engineering the future? Or are we creating tools that actually support this? And Dimi, I think you know that we are looking in the second application of that, all right? So the tools that support the law component in the EMDS, right? Otherwise it won't fly. And let me tell you some, my other foot is in the mobility domain, right? So I talk to authorities and operators on a daily basis. They are so far away from digitization, right? And it's not even digitalization, digitization. So we really have to keep that in mind if you want to roll out things like this, because most people in the mobility industry are simply not engaged into these kinds of solutions. So I think we're choosing a very long route here, but I leave it up to you decide, because frankly, I do not know whether this would work.
To be honest, Ferdinand, I'm not sure I got the intervention, right? Because the fact that some transport operators or stakeholders, they don't want to work on digitalization, it doesn't mean that we should not do something from our side, right?
No.
So
yes, I fully agree, Dimi. But then let's use the law to be leveraged, right? And not to come up with the solutions. There are 40 or pod providers or wallet providers in my data, right? At least 40. None of them are successful. Why not? Because there's not a demand at the moment.
No, this I'm not defending the pod solution here. We're discussing one option that it would be this way, but I didn't find till now another I say alternative or suggestion, and this is what I would like to hear. What would be the other alternative to be able to implement this kind of solution of managing your data, controlling your data in a way? And this is what I think it's interesting to hear.
Yes, and that's a relationship-based model on the fact that every data interaction is a transaction as such. And if you look at that perspective, that means that data has value, which would be a good outcome for the EMDS, right? Or for any data space to be, well, interesting for the future. And that means that within the context of data being part of a transaction, it's already covered by Article 6.1b, right? Where it simply states that if you need any personal information for the interaction, right, of the execution of a contract or the steps that lead up to that, it's already covered. So you don't need to give any more consent. Consent already stops. So reuse of data already stops in a natural fashion because of that single clause in the GDPR. And that clause is referred to by the Digital Governance Act. And that means that a lot of things we're trying to create here are already covered by the law, because if someone infringes on my rights, also on my economic rights or even social rights or any other kinds of rights, right? We have a penal system. We have the law system that ensures that people are, that everyone's level, right? And engineering doesn't do that. So what we need to look into is how can we manage that the information which is required in order to fulfill value in the market is only used in the sense that it's given out for. And that's the consent management we need. And even within that consent management, I can have different identities. So as we are now looking into with the Smart Ticketing Alliance, and this is also what I asked Claudio to contribute to, if he's available, if it's possible, is to create a semantic model around the exchanges of entitlements to well, to use a service of a shared bike or a bus or a metro or a train for payment. And that means that in the payment activities, my identity is constituted by probably my bank account number. And in the activities where I'm merely a passenger enjoying the service, I only need to identify with the fact that I have a valid title and no additional information is required. So, and this is a different way of approaching things that actually allows us to find commonalities in what most systems are already doing. And these are the, so I can share with a lot of you such documents, and I'm happy to, right? I just need to get some clearance from the Smart Ticketing Alliance board of directors, but I'm happy to ask. But these are the things that also manage personal data, but in a very granular fashion.
From my side, what I see is that the fact that, for example, legislation doesn't or penalizes, as you said, someone to do something, it doesn't mean that we should not explore from the technology side how things can be enabled. I think that's the point of it. But thank you very much. We know indeed already the ticketing use case that you were promoting already from the first calls that we had, and I'm sure everyone that is interested can follow up. But I would suggest to move also to the rest of the people with raised hands.
Yes. Okay. Thank you for your intervention. I think next one is Elf.
Thank you. So I'm F. Pavlik, a participant of Solid Community Group, also one of the co-editors of Solid Application Interoperability, in short SAI. And I don't know how technical we are willing to get today, but I'll be very interested how you approach the discovery and authorization. And also, which of the existing kind of drafts are you using, like something like SAI or type indexes, or for authorization, ACP, WAC, maybe so ODRL-based technologies? And maybe if we can at least get a little idea today, and if we don't want to get too technical, like how we can follow up to actually understand from my side, and I believe the Solid CG, how you technically solve those problems of discovery and authorization.
Claudio, do you want me to take that question?
Yeah, of course, yes.
Hi, Elf. I think that it's obviously quite a technical topic, but a very relevant question. I think I would be very happy to go into a lot more detail in an offline in a separate call. But just to give you the gist, as you say, like for discovery and access requests, there hasn't been a full standardization process yet, even in the draft specification as it is. So we had to improvise for some parts of that and fill in some gaps left and right with regards to discovery and authorization. We proposed a very simplified solution to both, in which we use a centralized approach, where we extended the functionality of the pod server to, for example, with regards to discovery, provide a list of resources that adhere to a certain data type. And for the access request part, we designed a very simple interface that would allow for access requests. They're based on the practical experiences we have already had at the Flemish government, but they don't one-to-one copy them for several reasons that would lead us a little bit too far. But I hope I already answered a little bit your question. And again, I'm very happy to set up a call to dive into a lot more detail together with our CTO to discuss that.
Okay, I'll be very much interested. Thank you very much.
All right. I also saw David, your hand was risen.
Yes, thank you. Possibly a lower level conversation. You referred to movement of data from the solid pod into the transport data space, and you talked about it being anonymized, and I just wondered where your thoughts were on where the anonymization process occurs. Is that a function of the solid pod itself, or is there some intermediary step that is actually receiving the personal data and anonymizing it?
Well, obviously, I think it should be implemented at the level of the pod server of the provider at the moment that the data is transferred. Obviously, if we don't solve that issue at that point, then we leave it up to the kind heart of the provider to anonymize the data.
I completely agree with you. That is precisely what we're doing as part of our work in supporting research programs, data co-ops, data intermediaries, and data trusts, where data coming from the personal data store via our personal data exchange is anonymized before it is delivered.
Yeah, and I think if we agree already on that point, that there are two potential solutions, again, not to go into too much detail, but then you could say either you anonymize the data, if it has to be anonymized before you share the data, you could say you anonymize the data at the moment that you store it, but that obviously would limit the added value of the data for transactional purposes where anonymization is not required.
We anonymize it for different use cases, but the majority of our work is improving operational service delivery between individuals and multiple service providers. So data that is identifiable is an inherent part of those transactions.
Yeah.
More around health and social care and public services rather than transactional ticketing and things like that. It's more about making sure the right information's in the right place at the right time.
Yeah, exactly. So you're referring to anonymizing data on the fly, right?
We
you
do
keep the
that
raw data in an identifiable way, and then you anonymize on the fly when requested.
For the use cases that require it.
Yeah.
We do a lot of work on public health, evaluations of projects, research dashboards, where they don't want the data, but what they maybe want to have is pseudo-anonymized data, so they've got a unique identifier for a longitudinal study where they're taking feedback from the same people over time, but they will never know who the people are.
Yeah, makes sense.
Okay, thank you, David, for your question. Malte, I see your hand is raised again.
I think, as the line of speakers is not long, maybe I can have a second round. I mean, first, a generic reflection, also in response to Ferdinand. I think no one should be religious. What is the better model? Debate whether you should transact or you should exchange via pods or similar, or whether we can live in a completely networked data space where the different actors interact directly is as old as the discussion. And I think currently the data spaces are very much also influenced by the International Data Spaces Association, which really believes in peer-to-peer interaction. So that's why also Kai Kukaniemi and colleagues have so much trouble to get intermediary building blocks in the conceptual blueprint architecture of the Data Spaces Support Center. And the key foundation in the Netherlands, many people advocated basically a perfectly networked protocol level discussion without any intermediate storage. My personal take is, and I don't know what, I'm happy also to speak after David, with whom we interacted over the years a lot, that probably for different problems, the two approaches make sense. So a direct question to you, and because I think that's one of the key kind of benefits of a pod, is that you can bring the algorithm to the personal data, and the point of integration is the individual. That's always been a selling point of having a pod. That this is harder probably to achieve, not impossible, but with another type of architecture. So is Solid at the moment mature enough to receive also this more federated machine learning kind of situation? That's my first question. And the second question is also maybe more to understand, because I didn't fully capture this at the beginning, what is the kind of going to be the usability policy in terms of openly licensing after the commission money has dried out? Is there an idea that this will be basically an open source component that any kind of mobility provider for the EMDS, or potentially maybe even beyond, and can use in the future. So 2 questions, if I may. And then just to say on the data governance, because it comes up so often that you're trying to comply. I mean, it was funny because I've been writing most of this, and there is obviously a regulation that regulates Atumi as a company offering pods, as it would regulate any other MyData operator, so to say, if you are in the business of facilitating economically motivated / commercial, as we say it in the Act. But there is no, I mean, this obviously this exercise that we're speaking here is not a compliance exercise. It's finding one among alternative ways of making data control, data portability happen, work, and seeing which are really the architectures that work, whether decentralized pods are one building. And that's why I'm so happy that actually you take it on you to experiment with a solid solution. And I think the reflex to say, but yeah, the market has not called for this, is under evaluating the huge rollout problem. So you need to scale this such a solution. That's why Atumi is a good way to scale it. The market has currently not offered it because none of the big players really invested in this. I know some tried or had ideas, but it didn't really fly because it's not really clear who benefits from really moving to such a decentralized approach. I mean, would individual companies have an intrinsic own interest to move the whole society into a decentralized pod-based IT architecture? And the answer is no. Very much the same as electronic identities could not be developed by the market. Maybe this is at such a foundational level of our IT thinking that it needs to either come from a really concerted action or from state-funded activities such as we have it now in Flanders.
Well, seeing you addressed me, Malte, I think we have to turn around the narrative. And the narrative is now that we centralize information around platforms. And these platforms have a basic investment rule. That's the number of account holders and the number of interactions, right? Or the actions that are related to those accounts and thus the account holders, because there's somewhat a commercial benefit in there. The REST data of their production environments, all right? For instance, in ticketing, REST data would be the fact that someone would travel from A to B, right? Is an addition on what the ticketing solution is trying to do, is to manage the fares, all right? To get the money for the services at all. This REST data is of value. Right? It's currently being sold by ticketing operators to authorities at a price, whilst the information itself comes from individuals. If we can change around that narrative through the democratization of that information, and we can, because under the DGA, one has the right to get that information out of such a ticketing solution to use it to their own benefits. And this is what we're currently not doing. So instead of trying to put something on the side of it, we need to drill into the platforms as is, and we can leverage them through these regulations. And if we do not do that at a large scale, or motivate these organizations to do that themselves, right, we're never going to accomplish, because then we're stuck in the world of platforms. And we can have lengthy discussions over data sovereignty, but they really don't care. And then we have to go into a very legal battle with them. And I think that we can turn the narrative around by helping them to understand that, for me, personal data is, and certainly within ticketing schemes, is a toxic resource. It costs money. It doesn't give you as much satisfaction as you would need, right? It doesn't return on investment as much as you need to create your security environments. So why not leave that data there where it's best stuck, all right? And this is with the individual itself and with the transport operator. That means that a ticketing platform And I'm talking ticketing platform. It could also be booking, or it could also be any other two-sided marketplace platform, is actually perceived as an agent, right, for both sides of the agreement. And this is actually what they do. But what they did is that they nestled in there by themselves, whilst it's thanks to me and thanks to service operators or transport operators that they actually can run their water mills or windmills. And they have to be compliant. And if we can help them with that compliance and at the same time ensure that we open up that data to freely flow wherever, whether it's a solid pod, where it's a floating Docker, whether it's a wallet, whether it's an EU digital component, I don't care where it flows. I just want to make sure, one, that it flows, and two, that the individual can also make sure that it flows to those organizations that it wants it to flow to, and only for the minimal required aspects, and only for the duration of the data processing activities that they need my information for, because that's the only way that I can really control my identity. And then you have to have indeed a legal or penal system where you can say, hey, now I see that you are doing things with my information that I didn't consent to. So please open up your whole data processing environment, because the only way that I can consent, right, literally consent to something, is if you created transparency, because otherwise I have no knowledge of how you process my information. So I cannot make an informed consent. And this is interesting. These are the things that we can leverage these legislations with. And frankly, for me, again, whether it's Solid or any other, please, right? I think that there's a true market for that, and I question whether they need to be for free, because they actually fulfill a very valuable role in life. The same that I need to pay my bank for my account, right? They hold something that is of value to me. But now the trick is, how can we make sure that the value of having an account with all my personal data in there on the acts, facts, information, etc., all right, or even the creation of information through algorithms or microservice algorithms simply connected to my pod instead of having to transfer all that information elsewhere, it becomes apparent. But the thing is, we're still drawing lines in architectures. And we should imagine that we need to add things like space and time in architectures. And that's more difficult to do on an abstract level. And that means that if I go through life, I go through a series of activities which could be part of bigger processes. But then you can actually make sense of what we're trying to organize on a data space level, because we're trying to create an ecosystem of entities that need to communicate in a ecosystem. That means that the ecosystem is a super system to all the entities. And businesses and natural subjects are on the same level as being an entity, right? They have the same rights. Even stronger, a legal entity cannot make any decisions or cannot act on their own behalf unless a natural person entitled to do that on behalf of that organization does that. And that means that every data interaction of a legal entity has to do with GDPR and DGA. And this is not in the data space architecture. And that's interesting, because actually we're creating a GSM model and everyone's talking about trust and accountability. Yes, you are accountable for the fact that I consented to something, and you need to show me that you did exactly what I said you could do, because that delivers on trust. If I ask my kids to make me a cup of coffee every morning and suddenly I end up with salt in my coffee instead of sugar, the trust goes away. So trust is only the fact that I have a repetition of outcome based upon the input that I required. And it has nothing to do with technology, nor with engineering.
I would have to the initial comment on Malte. I think that, I mean, we are at a point where even if this is not attractive to people, it's almost, we have to take it almost as an ideology or an act of activism, and less a little bit of driven by profit or benefits. Because, I mean, otherwise, I mean, we end up, you know, postponing until this becomes a matter of you know, yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say, I don't want it because I don't like it, because I don't want to say it becomes a not pushed by profit. But if we get to that point, that means that the pieces on the board has been moved into a position where there is very little left for the individual. Yeah, so I would, you know, altogether I would really much, I don't have much power in this, but if I had, I would really much to anticipate time, and you know, really steer it in a direction that for once or for one more time, it is in the direct best interest of the citizen, which is everybody. I mean, here we're not talking as, you know, it's us and then there is other people. It's me. I mean, my data personally has been leaked out by the Portuguese airlines. So I found that my personal data are all on the dark web, everything. I mean, and luckily I've used PayPal to pay my tickets, so at least my credit card is not there. So this touches me directly. And yeah, again, I mean, until something happens to you, you think it's you know, someone else's issues, but in an era of platforms, as Ferdinand is saying, you know, it's very much you know, you need a hole in that wall and everything comes through. But so yeah, that my say thoughts would be, we should think of this, yeah, maybe not aside from the engineering points of view, aside from the architectural point of view, very much as an act of what, you know, how the law is, how the law interprets this is to protect. And if we can, you know, advance the work without making it second to an interest that is more than apparent, I think it's a good way to go on.
I agree with Claudio, and we need to leverage the current market. And we need to give them something. So it's very easy to stand at the opposite side of the pool and to say to people, you have to dive in, right? But unless you want to coach them from leading by example, you have to go in, right? Swim across, invite people to come in, show them that the temperature is okay, show them that the floor is not as deep that they would drown immediately, all right? And that they can be safe being there first before we teach them to swim across to the other side. And I feel that with the data spaces and with a lot of these very well thought through engineered solutions, we are standing on the opposite side of the pool and shouting to people to use it. No, come in, right? There are advantages here. So let's take the small advantages, and I refer to management tools like Kaizen, right? It's not the big turnover that we create, but if we have a lot of small pieces we can put together, the value is immense. I'm discussing with the Transport Economics and Finance Committees on how we can open up ticketing for the whole of Europe, all right, thanks to data access and usage policies on the one side to help the citizens, but on the other side to create a transparent clearing and settlement house, right? It isn't the technology, right? That's not the question. It's the fact that we need to have the right people on board in order to leverage this. Because the value for authorities in reducing a ticket price, if only by a cent, is huge. London does 18 million transactions a day, right? And now they pay 5% over each transaction because they use the EMV environment. If we can leverage those, we can reduce the price of a ticket by 5%, or we can keep that value and actually use it for what the domain is called for, public transport. And now we're just pushing it towards platforms that see themselves in a new and different role. It's silly. We're practically doing things really silly. And and to be honest, guys, there are 3 guys here from the commission. There's really lack of leadership.
Okay, let's like
Can I ask a question once more? Sorry, guys. I was asking the question on, can Solid already do federated learning, and what's the rollout plan for the ultimately proved concept?
If you want, I can take that question. So very concretely, at the moment, there are no plans yet to add that to Solid. I also think that the question whether Solid should support that feature is maybe a little bit out of the, well, not immediately relevant. I do believe, however, that the feature you're referring to is relevant, that it's offered by the market. But whether it should be Solid that solves that or provide that as a feature, I honestly don't know. And I see that Elf has already raised his hand. I think Elf has also quite a good vision on that. But from my point of view, for me, it can be Solid that provides a functionality, or it can be that Solid is compatible with new future technologies and protocols that offer that functionality. And I'm more in the camp of the latter, where I prefer Solid to stay as lean as possible and focus on what it does best, and be compatible with other technologies, as it does for identity. So it works with OIDC on an identity level. So I think that's the way forward. But I think Elf has quite a good opinion on that as well.
Thank you. So from my side, I see Solid, like the important design principle is Solid is that the servers are simple and generic, and clients are the smart ones. So I think, you know, taking that approach, one could, if one is able to do it client side, so there are smart clients that are responsible for the learning, the Solid would be just a way of working with the data, getting access to the data, again, discovery of the data. So I think it should be possible in principle, but I would be very interested to maybe try to document it as a use case and extract some requirements from that, and then we could discuss it in a community group for now, maybe later in a working group when it's created, and see how it can be addressed based on the provided use case and requirement. But again, in principle, if it can be handled as a smart client, it should be able to be accomplished within Solid platform or framework, let's say.
All right. Thank you, Elf. Marcello, I saw that your hand was raised some minutes ago. Do you still have a question, or is it solved in the meantime?
Yeah, I have a question, maybe to Malte, actually. You made a comment regarding an architecture to access, or infrastructure to access distributed data might eventually need to come from governments or from the European Commission. But this seems to be not the direction in which the Commission is actually heading at this particular moment. And I totally agree with with the first part of what you said. So what do you think is needed for changing direction, in a sense, and making effectively the Commission as the real client for such an infrastructure, because eventually it's for the benefit of the citizen and the organization within the European Union. So what do you think is needed to make this happen?
How can I say them? There's never the Commission, because the Commission is doing a lot of things. This is a very useful example of an experiment with something. At the same time, we're procuring something as ill-defined currently as I find it, as simple, where no one really knows what it actually will do. So the Commission is going in multiple directions at the same time, and that's maybe not necessarily even a bad thing. So, and should we actually own the infrastructure? I don't think this would completely overstretch our capacities. If we were owning any infrastructure, I mean, with Simple, we're trying. I don't know what's the long-term business model to actually make this a stable infrastructure, and who owns Simple, so to say, the SIMPL middleware for data spaces. Sorry, that's not really a good answer. Maybe you want to focus me on a more I don't know, But then it goes also to DMI, what happens actually long term? To whom should we hand over? And that really falls in the whole debate on what is digital public infrastructure. I mean, that's not only networks, that's also maybe application layers. But I don't know, I'm just a small person somewhere in the middle of the commission. I can't give you a sense of direction whether the EU and the member states together will build strong digital public infrastructure.
I can add, if you want, from my side, that I think one thing that probably Malte mentioned at the beginning regarding the Commission, let's say, or the Commission view, is also what we would consider recommendations from the Data Space Support Center in a way, because it's an initiative that it was started from the Commission. So this kind of recommendation already, it's something that we are looking for, and that's why we will test this POC. But in general, I have already asked this question to the Data Space Support Center of what are the recommendations, what should be the building blocks to cybersecurity, personal data, and so on. So this is one part about the building blocks of data spaces. When it comes to the infrastructure, I think it will really depend on the sectoral data space, because we've seen already that different data spaces, like the health one, the energy, you have the manufacturing, like also the data space, like the Catenex and so on, they will need different approaches. Some of them more industry-driven, business-driven, some of them might require more of a centralized approach and so on. For the mobility and logistics side, I think one option when it comes to the infrastructure, common infrastructure, could be interesting to see how the discussion around the EDIC will evolve. If you are familiar with the EDIC, the European Digital Infrastructure Consortia, some of them, they have been launched already for other areas, like the Out EDIC, relevant to the languages and the blockchain and so on. So this could be one solution, member state driven, but at the same time, the member states that are currently involved in the EDIC for mobility and logistics data, they are open to private actors, which, for example, for the other EDICs, I think till now, private actors are not members. So that's why it can be really adjusted solutions to the specific sectoral data space to tackle the infrastructure question.
All right, George, do you have another question, or do you want to?
I present because I arrived a bit late, so I'm George Lobo. I'm currently leading the SEMIC team, replace of Alexandra, my colleague. So I mean, just to clarify about what's simple, I mean, simple by itself, it will be a middleware. It's a library that can be used. So it's not simple by itself will not simple open, which is the middleware, will not require an infrastructure because it's code, and but it's something that can be downloaded. And what will be, I would say, requires infrastructure will be the implementation for each data space. So it's called a Simple Live, and the Commission is implementing, I mean, has the plan to implement 6 of them, for which they are responsible, for mainly procurement, smart cities, and this is also to be decided. There would be, if there is an EDIC, an appropriate EDIC to support that, to hand it over to EDIC. And the others where there is no EDIC, the Commission might support, but it's not the goal of the Commission to support an infrastructure for the whole simple thing. So I mean, simple will allow, will give the middleware to allow every data space to speak with each other, the others that are using it, but it's a sort of decentralized way. So, but it's not that simple by itself, open. It's no infrastructure. It's just a library that can be used. So this is to clarify and to come. I mean, also the financing of infrastructure. Either it's foreseen in a regulation. Sometimes it happens. For example, the ones on the technical system. This is something that was written that the Commission should develop and maintain the. So this is something the Commission has to find the funds to be able to maintain this technical part. It's not, if not, I mean, it's always difficult because, as you know, the discussion on budget are always complicated. And being in Digit, we know that we are struggling always to finance the system we need to maintain. So, I mean, there cannot be any commitment. And also, I mean, to reflect, but I'm not sure, because if what Ferdinand was saying, I mean, the fact that we have a law, does not solve all the problems. I mean, a law, it doesn't mean that it will be applied. And I don't know, I mean, by an individual, you're saying, you're going to your local company or the platform you're using, you're not respecting the Data Governance Act. I'm not sure that we are playing on the same level. So I guess that this might not reflect, but I mean, this is why also we have big initiative on I mean, proposing. I mean, we propose, for example, in SEMIC, we propose standards that might be competing with some standards that might not be free on semantic assets, but it's a role to say that these are open, can be used by anybody, can be implemented by anybody. It's the same with the open source program run by Connect, Next Generation Internet, where we propose solutions that can be used by anybody, and this is after is to let the market play this role. But this is, I mean, it's not incompatible that we are proposing solutions that are free of use to stakeholders that could be taken by anyone, even the big platforms. I mean, because I worked before in the Next Generation Internet Initiative, we think that there is the protocol matrix.org, which is, I would say, a concurrent allows to do, you know, I mean, it's just concurrent to messaging. I mean, no, sorry, not matrix.org, but I was talking more about ActivityPub, which is an alternative, which is free, can be used by anybody. It's used by Mastodon. And in fact, I mean, Threads is joining the Fediverse. So, I mean, it's something that is free. So even big platforms can use that. So, I mean, I guess we can still propose building blocks that can be used by large platform as well as smaller player to offer solution and to avoid, I mean, this big centralization for which we did the DMA, DSA regulations in order to give a more playing field for the industry at large. But maybe I misunderstood your comments, Ferdinand. It can be.
Well, George, thank you for elaborating on that. Now, my worry is more in the fact that so where we are currently and where we want to be is for me pretty far off the mark. And that's logical, right? We're trying to do this with a large group of organizations finding consensus on a certain level. And that means if you want to go together, you go quickly and it takes a lot of time, a lot of investments. If you want to go faster, right, you need smaller groups in order to lead that in a certain direction with the possibilities to fail and not to be heard by the rest. So I think we need to find a mix in there somewhere. The fact that we're giving out tenders to things that have not been substantialized in any way, for me, is with a business administration background is ludicrous, right? We're ordering bridges or tunnels to something we don't even understand that we want to reach the other side. So we're doing things because we can. I wouldn't say misallocation of funds, but yeah, it comes close. So if you look at how big organizations do this, is that they have a certain strong leadership pushing in one direction. It might not always be the best direction, but it's a getting things done mentality. And I see a lot of presentations like this, and it's talking about things, it's not getting things done. And we get to a certain point, and if you say to me from the EC point of view that the law is a flexible instrument, then my toes go and my hair stands upright, right? I think we're trying to create a legal framework that actually facilitates, right? It functions as a fundament. If we don't respect the law anymore, we're lawless, and then life on Earth simply ends, right? So sometimes I end up in these meetings, and I love to put in a counter voice, right? Because I hope it contributes to the way that you think about things. I don't want to be the bad guy all the times, right? But I do want to see some progress being made instead of us discussing 2 hours of pixels presented with regards to working groups that haven't even been formalized. So yeah, I'm just wondering, right? I want to help, but sometimes I simply do not know how anymore.
Thank you, Ferdinand. I would like to not stick to philosophical questions, so let's see if we have any remaining questions specifically about the proof of concept. Otherwise, we can also wrap it up earlier.
Yes, yes. So no hands is showing. The questions are more like the chat is more with notes than questions, and yeah. Yeah, I think it's fair to say that we have talked enough, and yeah, and it's, to me personally, it's very good to have points of controversy, because it leaves everybody, you know, obviously with an idea that everything is open, everything is on the table, and there is not just one side is working for having things done. So altogether, I want to thanks again everybody who's joined to the meeting on the 1st of July, everybody who participated to make this work possible, everybody who has exposed their idea, and has also informed us on what is the Commission doing at the moment. And I would, thanks again, and wish you a nice, for those who are going on vacation, nice vacation. I know there is some people who are going on vacation in the next couple of days. And for those who stay in the office, well, have a nice continuation of the week. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you for the work.
Thanks, Claudia.
For the questions and the discussion.
Thank you very much.
Bye, guys.
Thanks. Bye.